I want to ask you something before I start. Think about the person you work next to every day. The one who knows your schedule, your habits, which days you stay late, which parking spot you always use. You trust them, right? That's exactly what I thought about Daniel. I worked at a mid-sized logistics company in Columbus, Ohio. Nothing glamorous. Shipment tracking, inventory reports, the kind of work where you drink too much coffee and watch the clock more than you'd like to admit. Daniel had been there about 8 months when I started. Quiet guy. Polite. Always brought his lunch in a black insulated bag, always ate at his desk, always said have a good night before he left. The kind of coworker you'd describe as fine, normal, unremarkable. For almost a year, I had absolutely no reason to think otherwise. It started with something so small I almost didn't register it. I mentioned offhand one morning that I'd stopped at a gas station on Fairfield Road on my way in. Just making conversation, something about a ridiculous line at the register. Daniel nodded and said, "Yeah, that one gets busy around 7:45. I thought nothing of it. Maybe he drove that route too. Then maybe 3 weeks later, I came in wearing a jacket I hadn't worn in a while. Daniel looked up from his screen and said, "Haven't seen that one in a while." I laughed it off. Coworkers notice things. It happens, but it kept happening. Little comments, little observations, things that were just slightly too specific. He mentioned my gym once, not the chain, the specific location. I never told him where I worked out. He asked once if I'd gotten my car looked at, said he noticed it had been making a noise. I drove a sedan. We didn't carpool. We didn't park near each other, or so I thought. I started paying attention. One evening I left late, maybe 8 o'clock. The lot was nearly empty. I noticed Daniel's car 3 rows over, parked in a spot that had a direct sightline to mine. I didn't think much of it, parking lots or parking lots. But the next week I left late again and there it was, same spot. And the week after that, I mentioned it to my friend who also worked there. He got quiet in a way that made my stomach drop. He said he'd noticed something too, that Daniel had asked him once casually whether I was seeing anyone. He'd said he didn't know. He'd said, "I'm just asking because he seems like he's got a lot going on lately." Which is a strange thing to say about someone. A very strange thing. I want to be honest at this point. I told myself I was probably overreacting. People are awkward. People say weird things. I didn't want to be the person who causes drama at work over a feeling. So I did nothing. I kept showing up, kept doing my job, kept saying good morning and good night like everything was fine. That was my mistake. About 2 months after I first started noticing things, my computer at work had a software issue. It came to look at it, and while they were running diagnostics, they found a small program installed under a generic system folder name. The IT guy, young kid, maybe 24, got very quiet when he found it. He asked me if I had installed anything recently. I said no. He said he needed to escalate it. What they found was a keystroke logger, something that had been recording everything I typed. Emails, passwords, personal messages I'd sent through my browser on breaks. It had been installed approximately 4 months prior, and the installation timestamp put it on a Thursday afternoon, a day I had left early for a dentist appointment. The only person who would have known I was leaving early that day was someone I told directly, or someone who had access to my calendar. Daniel sat close enough to see my screen. I kept my calendar open on my second monitor. I never thought twice about it. HR got involved. Then management. Then, eventually, the police. When they searched his workstation, they found more. A personal folder buried inside a renamed system directory containing photographs. Pictures of my car in the parking lot. Pictures of the front of my apartment building, and I had never, not once, told him where I lived. A handwritten note that listed my daily schedule, broken down by hour, annotated with things like usually stays until 6 on Tuesdays and goes to the gym after work on Mondays, back by 8. He had been building a picture of my life, quietly, patiently, for months. When they brought him in for questioning, he didn't get angry, didn't deny everything outright. What he said, and this is the part that still sits wrong with me, was that he was just paying attention, that he liked to understand the people around him, that he didn't think he'd done anything wrong. He had documented my entire routine without my knowledge. He had installed software to read my private communications. He had photographed my home, and he genuinely seemed to believe that none of that crossed a line. He was let go immediately. The police filed charges. I got a new apartment. But here's the thing I keep coming back to, the thing I can't shake no matter how much time passes. The keystroke logger was installed 4 months before I even started noticing anything was off. Which means for 4 months, he was doing all of this, and I had no idea. I was sitting right next to him, making small talk about coffee and traffic, completely unaware that he had turned my daily life into something he was quietly cataloging. I think about all the things I typed during those 4 months. Personal emails, private conversations, passwords to accounts I still haven't fully secured. I think about how long it might have gone on if my computer hadn't glitched. I think about the photographs and how many times I must have pulled into my parking lot and walked to my door while he was noting the time. So the next time you're at your desk and your coworker asks something just slightly too specific, pay attention to that feeling. Don't talk yourself out of it the way I did. Because by the time I trusted my gut, he already knew everything. I'd been working at a mid-sized insurance company in Columbus, Ohio for about 3 years when Derek transferred to our department. Quiet guy, polite, the kind of person who always refills the coffee machine and never microwaves fish in the break room. He dressed well, kept his desk clean, laughed at the right moments in meetings. On paper, Derek was the ideal coworker. It started small, the way these things always do. About 2 months after he joined, I noticed my lunch in the fridge had been moved. Not missing, just shifted to a different shelf. I didn't think much of it. Communal fridges are a disaster. But then the next week it happened again. And this time, the container had been opened. One of my sandwiches had a single bite taken out of it. I mentioned it to my manager almost as a joke. He laughed and sent an email to the whole floor reminding people not to touch other people's food. Case closed, I figured. But then I started noticing other things. My stapler was always on the left side of my desk. I'm left-handed, it's just where it goes. One morning I came in and it was on the right. My monitor brightness had been turned all the way down. My chair height was wrong, like someone shorter had been sitting in it. None of these things were dramatic. None of them were worth reporting. But they all added up to one quiet, creeping feeling someone had been at my desk. I started coming in 10 minutes early to check. That's when I noticed Derek was always already there. Every single morning, even before our manager. He'd be sitting at his desk, coffee in hand, watching the door with this calm, patient expression. He'd smile when I walked in, a small smile, like he'd been waiting. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then the text started. I never gave Derek my personal number. I know that for a fact because I'm careful about that kind of thing. But one Tuesday evening I got a message from an unknown number that said, "Hope you got home okay. The traffic on 315 was rough tonight." I had taken 315 home that night. I didn't respond. I saved the number and tried to trace it. Nothing came up, just a prepaid line. I asked around quietly at work whether anyone had shared the department contact list externally. Nobody had officially, but contact lists get screenshot. They get forwarded. They disappear into people's phones without anyone thinking twice. I started driving different routes home. Things at the office stayed professional on the surface. Derek was normal in meetings. He'd ask reasonable questions during projects, help out during deadlines, chat casually in the elevator. But I started paying attention to his patterns in a way I never had before, and what I noticed unsettled me. He knew things he shouldn't have known. During a conversation about weekend plans with another coworker, Derek mentioned a new restaurant that had opened near me. Not near the office, near my apartment. In my neighborhood. a place I'd actually been to the week before. He slipped it in casually like it was nothing and then kept talking. I went cold. That night I checked my car. I don't know exactly what I was looking for, but something in my gut told me to look. I found it on the second search, a small magnetic GPS tracker tucked up inside the rear wheel well. It was cheap, the kind you can order online for $30, but it worked. My hands were shaking when I pulled it off. I went to the police the next morning. I brought the tracker. I brought screenshots of the unknown texts. I brought a written account of everything that had happened over the past several weeks. The officer I spoke to was kind but honest with me. None of it was enough. The tracker had no fingerprints. The texts couldn't be tied to anyone. Everything else was circumstantial. He told me to document everything going forward, to vary my routines, and to be careful. Be careful. As if I wasn't already terrified. Going back into that office was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I sat at my desk 3 feet from Derek, watching him type with this completely unbothered expression, and I thought, he knows I found it. He has to know. And he's not worried at all. That was the worst part. His calm. I requested a desk move that week, citing a noise issue. I got moved to a different row. I started taking my lunch off-site. I told 2 trusted coworkers what was happening, not as gossip, but so someone else knew, so there was a record of me saying it out loud. 3 weeks later, a woman in a different department filed an HR complaint against Derek. I didn't know her well. She sat near the parking garage entrance. She worked late hours. And apparently Derek had been leaving notes on her car. Not threatening notes, friendly ones, but notes that referenced things she'd never told him. Her coffee order, the color of her gym bag, the name of her sister who'd visited her at lunch once. HR investigated. They found enough to terminate him. I wish I could tell you I felt relieved. I wish the story ended there. But 3 days after Derek was let go, I walked out to my car after work and found a single sticky note on my windshield. No threat, no name, just a smiley face drawn in black ink. He wanted me to know he still could. I moved apartments 4 months later. I changed my routines, my routes, the gym I went to. I became a different version of myself, more watchful, more guarded, more aware of the invisible line between being seen and being studied. I've never confirmed it was Derek. I can't prove it. But I know. The way you know when something is wrong before you can explain it. The way your body understands danger before your brain catches up. That's the thing nobody tells you about this kind of fear. It doesn't come from one big, terrifying moment. It builds in the quiet spaces, in moved objects and strange texts, and a smile from across the room that lasts just a half second too long. Sometimes the scariest thing in the world is someone completely ordinary, sitting 3 feet away, knowing far more about you than they should, and saying absolutely nothing. You know, that one person at work who just always seems a little too interested in you. Not in a friendly way. In a way you can't quite name, so you brush it off and tell yourself you're being paranoid. I told myself that for 8 months. I wish I hadn't. I worked the night shift at a fulfillment warehouse outside of Columbus, Ohio. 12-hour shifts, 3 nights a week, scanning packages and loading pallets. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well. And the crew was small enough that you got to know people fast. That's where I met Ethan. Ethan started about 2 months after me. Quiet guy, mid-30s, always showed up exactly on time, never a minute early or late. He kept to himself mostly, ate lunch alone, didn't say much during breaks. I felt bad for him, honestly. So I started making small talk. Asked him where he was from, what he did before this, normal stuff. He answered everything, short, clean answers, but he always turned the questions back to me, every single time. Where did I live? Did I drive far to get here? Did I have family nearby? Did I live alone? I answered without thinking, because that's what you do. You're just making conversation. About 3 months in, I noticed Ethan started requesting the same shifts as me. At first, I didn't even connect the dots. The warehouse let people swap shifts freely, so I figured he just liked the overnight hours. Same as me. Then I noticed he always parked next to my car. The lot held maybe 200 vehicles, and Ethan's truck was always right there, driver's side hugging the space next to mine. I laughed about it with a woman named Teresa who worked the receiving dock. She said, "That's a little weird." And then we both moved on. But then things started feeling off in ways I couldn't explain away. I'd come back from the bathroom and my water bottle would be moved. Not knocked over, just shifted to the other side of my workstation. Little things. The kind of things that make you wonder if you're losing your mind, because who would do that? For what reason? One night, I mentioned to Ethan that my car was making a grinding noise, and I was dreading the repair bill. 2 days later, I came in for my shift, and there was a folded piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. It was a handwritten list of auto shops in my area, ranked by price with little notes next to each one. No name on it. When I asked around, nobody claimed it. I knew it was Ethan. But again, what was I supposed to say? He helped me. That's not a crime. That's not even inappropriate. So I said nothing. Then one night in February, everything shifted. We were on break and Ethan sat down across from me in the break room. He slid his phone across the table. He said, "Is this where you live?" On the screen was a Google Maps screenshot. It was my street. My actual street in my neighborhood, 40 minutes from the warehouse. I felt the air leave my lungs. I asked him how he knew that. He said he'd seen my address on a shift form once and remembered it. He said it casually, like it was nothing. Like memorizing a coworker's home address from a glance at a clipboard was a totally normal thing a person does. He said he'd driven past once, just to see what part of town I lived in. I picked up my phone and I said I had to make a call. I walked out of that break room and I stood in the hallway with my heart slamming against my ribs, trying to figure out if I just heard what I thought I heard. He had driven to my house. He had never told me, and he had just now decided to bring it up like it was small talk. I went to my supervisor that same night. I told her everything, the shift changes, the parking, the note on my car, and what he just said. She looked uncomfortable. She said she'd look into it. She asked me if I felt threatened. I didn't know how to answer that because nothing he'd done was technically threatening. But I was terrified. Nothing happened for 4 days. No write-up, no meeting, nothing. Ethan kept showing up to my shifts. He stopped talking to me, which almost made it worse. He just watched me from across the floor. Not constantly, just enough. I started parking on the street outside the lot instead of inside it. Then one night I got off at 6 in the morning, walked to my car, and found my driver's side door unlocked. I always lock it, always. There was nothing missing, nothing moved, but the door was unlocked. I called out of my next shift, then the one after that. I filed a formal complaint with HR and I put everything in writing, dates, times, incidents, the conversation in the break room. I also called the non-emergency police line and asked if any of this rose to a legal level. The officer I spoke to said that without a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do. But he told me to document everything and to tell people in my life what was happening. HR suspended Ethan pending an investigation. I don't know what they found. They don't tell you that. What I do know is that he was gone within 2 weeks, and a different supervisor called me to confirm I could return to work. I did go back. Different shift, different crew, different part of the warehouse. For a long time, I thought about what would have happened if he'd never said anything in that break room. If he just kept doing what he was doing, the little things, the invisible things, and I'd never had a moment concrete enough to report. How much further would it have gone? How long before I realized the situation I was actually in? Because that's the thing nobody tells you about people like Ethan. They don't announce themselves. They don't act like villains. They act helpful. They act quiet. They memorize your schedule, learn your routines, map the geography of your life, one small piece of information at a time. And by the time you see the whole picture, they already know more about you than you ever meant to share. That morning, I found my car door unlocked. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time before I turned the key. Not because I was scared someone was in the backseat, because I realized that someone had been standing right next to my car in the dark before I got there, and I never even saw them coming. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss new stories. Drop a comment below, tell me your thoughts, tell me if this changed how you look at the people around you. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. I'll see you in the next video.